Hello, Hockey World. It is Monday, June 5th, 2023.
I'm Michael Lagello, and it was over 80 degrees in Buffalo this weekend, and then I wake up today and it's 55.
Yeah, I'm Kevin Allen, and it's colder in Michigan today, too. It was lovely, but it does not seem like June, that's for sure.
Still hot as hell here. And I'm Michael, and you're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. The podcast comes every Monday through Friday to fill you in on the coming and goings in the hockey world. And I want to talk game one before we start.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was a fascinating game, and it's funny because I was listening to people talk about I picked Vegas to win the series, but now I don't. And I after watching one game, I realized that they're not going to win the series, and I can tell you why. And it just comes right down to what everybody thought was the star of the show in Game 1, Adin Hill, who I thought was not good at all. And to be honest, like watching his game, like he was, I mean, he made that incredible save, but how out of position was he to make that save too? I mean, he was really out of position to make that save. Well, he was doing the classic thing of a nervous goalie of skating of going past his post all the time, and Chuck hits the post one time, just waiting for him to do that. He waited for him to go past the post, and Florida's going to pick up on that. That's not something that they're not going to notice, and they. For a game that I thought the Panthers were going to come out and it was going to be hard for them to win because they hadn't played in a while and it's in Vegas, it's Stanley Cup Final at home, everything flying. They were right there with them in my mind. And
well, Kev, it was weird because, I mean, Russ, who's been a constant critic of Adin Hill, and if he joins the show, he'll be able to say it himself. He was saying Adin Hill was really, really, really good in Game 1. And I mean, yes, that save that he made, the paddle down save, was very similar to Braden Holtby's save against Vegas in 2018.
It wasn't, Mike. And can I interrupt for a second? It really wasn't, because they showed them back to back, and on television. Braden Holtby was in position and goes across to make the save with his paddle. Adin Hill sliding the wrong direction and puts his paddle backwards. And puts and Braden Holtby's paddle goes all the way to the post to block that shot. Adin Hill's paddle is right in the middle of the net.
I think what they were saying, they were similar in style, but
they happened in the same net. I never get that.
It was a dramatic, similar drama. That's all. Yeah. They were saying. I don't think they're, comparing them for technical variations. But I mean, it was a pretty spectacular thing. But I don't know whether he was great or he wasn't, but I thought that was an entertaining game, and it was pretty clear that both teams are in this, and I think it really could go either way. Although, historically, and I don't want to be the guy that's become all about the numbers, but the importance of winning Game 2 for Florida just can't be overstated. I mean, numbers that are just cannot be denied are. Teams that go up 2-0 in a series are, 45-5 in terms of winning that series. And when you do that at home, you got like a 92% chance, even higher, because only 3 teams have ever come from behind when they started on the road. And then I don't know why that is, but that's the case.
Just Stanley Cup Final, right?
Yeah, and it's only happened twice in the last 50 years. Like the first 3 happened, there was one in the 70s and whatever. So I saw that. I was actually, for a guy that's covered the league a long time, I was actually surprised by those numbers. I mean, because 2-0 doesn't seem insurmountable. In the old days, we used to sort of think, let's see what happens when we get to Florida. I have
a theory, Kev. Let me try this out on you.
Yeah.
Well, here's my theory. The difference between the Stanley Cup, obviously you're on for the Cup, that's given, but the difference between the Stanley Cup Finals in what I think is the most important factor in the playoffs sometimes is the desire to not be eliminated. I think the desire not to be eliminated is stronger in every round until the final when the desire to win it grows. Like that, I think because you can't play any more games. Like you're not you're not going to another series no matter what happens.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. But then why don't they win more then?
I think what happens is the team that gets up smells the cup, and I think that and they're there now, and the team that falls behind is like, well, we got here, but they start to come to terms with maybe, because I think it's a psychological thing to come to terms with not winning it. That is a very difficult thing to do psychologically. Like and I don't know that they start in their head preparing themselves for maybe not winning it. But I was talking to somebody in Florida who was telling me about the preparations that need to happen already. Like they're already, and they hate this because no team likes to think about winning, but they already have to go through. Both teams are going through the deals of working on hotels for games 5, 6, 7, and
Right.
5, 6, 7. They're already working on planes for 5, 6, and 7. It's like there's all this stuff, and but to me, the big thing is to get to the Stanley Cup Final. Like if you get there, the big thing in these guys' hearts is to keep playing as much as they can.
Well, okay, let me, because people in the chat are talking about the game itself and a narrative that I think is slightly inaccurate, because they were saying, Matthew Tkachuk had a bad game. I don't think he had a bad game. I think now the thing is, if you remember last year when Calgary played Edmonton, Evander Kane, who's immensely annoying the way he plays, he was the guy who, he's going to get underneath Matthew Tkachuk's skin.
Yeah.
And he did it effectively, and he took him off of his game, and that was one of the keys to Calgary losing to Edmonton. I don't think Matthew Tkachuk was off of his game, and at the end of the game when him and Eichel, and I can't remember I think it was Nick Hague, they were basically punching each other. It was 4-2 at that point. They were shorthanded. I don't know if the game was over with, but it was pretty much on the borderline of, this is message sending time for the next game. So I don't think Kev, he was off. I just don't, like X said, he hit the post. He had a couple opportunities. Yeah. He didn't cash in like he normally did during the first 3 rounds. And I think people if they underestimate what his impact on the game, well, we'll see what happens in game 2.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Mike. It wasn't like he was bad. He just, wasn't Superman in that game, and that's what happens when you play as well as he has, is the expectations for the outcome of the way you play, kind of rise. And because they didn't, win the game, people say, well, he must have had a bad game. I don't think that's true. I mean, I think it's not like he didn't do some of the same things he had done when, he was successful, but Vegas was playing well and they were opportunistic, and, Eichel had a really good game.
Yeah.
We were talking before the show, Mike and I were about, all the things that he never had an opportunity to do in Buffalo, Eichel is now doing, with one exception. We'll talk about that too, but some of the Vegas players were talking about what they didn't realize about Eichel is how effective he can be as a defensive player, and that he's got quick stick. Like they talk about, there are other players on the team that have a reputation for having quick sticks, but somebody said, I think Eichel's got the quick stick on the team in terms of being able to strip pucks and
strong. He's strong.
And he's beast, and he's just so fast. Like you said, you think you got to step on him, and you don't, because he's going to hunt you down. Yeah. So the only thing he hasn't gotten better at or hasn't been able to do is he's still terrible on faceoffs.
Yeah.
But we, like Mike and I were talking, you're not going to take him out of a center position just because of how good he is defensively. But he should try to work on it and be better. Yeah, he's at 44%. Like, that's wickedly poor. But
I mean, Stone made a great play on that almost high stick goal. Like that to block that out, to knock that out of the air, score off that shot. I mean, and it could have gone. It wasn't a high stick. They made the right call. But
it was really the one angle looked like it was over his shoulder, then the other angles looked below his shoulder.
It was super close, and you don't like to see a game decide on that, but you also don't like to see a play that's that good if it's legal taken away. Though to me, I was fine with it. Like I thought it was, a hell of a play.
But people, and you look at the box score and you look at things afterward and say, it was 2-2 with 13 minutes left to go in the game.
It really was, and it was 2-1 for the Panthers, and it was 1-0 for the Panthers. It was like,
and I can't blame Bobrovsky on the game-winning goal. He was completely screened. Like, so it wasn't the narrative of, well, they were rusty. No, I thought Florida played well. They jumped on him early. Stahl got that goal where I think that if you're going to fault Aiden Hill on one goal, or it would have been on that one where he, Stahl.
That was a perfect example of him being way overplaying it. Like he way overplayed the short side there, and then gave Stahl all the time in the world to get around and stuff it in. and then hit it off. And even then, Stahl hit it off of him. But you can't blame him for hitting it off of him. Honestly, that's a really impossible play for a goalie not to knock that puck in the net.
And Kev, even Paul Maurice after the game, I'm paraphrasing here. He was like, cool your jets, guys. It's like we were down 3-1 to Boston. So it's like, it's not like we want to play from behind, but like we lost one game. Cool it. We're fine. Yeah.
And then they're right to feel that way when you listen to the media. Like when you listen, I mean, I'm not going to say media. I haven't read that much of the media, but if you listen to XM, for example, during the day, and where they're talking hockey all day long, there has been like a thing like, well, Vegas is just better. They're good. It's a resounding feeling throughout there. And I think that's what Florida really wants to have out there. They've been fine with that, that plays into their game. But the reality was Vegas wasn't a whole lot better. And like I said, Florida was coming off of a big gap, and it was game 1 of a Stanley Cup Final in your home rink where you should be going full tilt like the Vegas was. So to me, the fact that Florida kept them, kept their shots low very early and kept them skating, and Florida proved they could skate with Vegas. Vegas is a fast team, so it's like to me that's just that once I saw they could skate with them, and then once I saw how Aiden Hill was playing, I changed my tune in my head as far as the prediction goes, because I'm like,
well, I'll say this, Kevin. This was this is why I'm confident in the Vegas pick that I made. Florida really did not come up against the team, even though I think Carolina's defense is better 1 through 6 than Vegas. Vegas has got the biggest defense in the NHL. They're all 6'2", 6'3". They're all, they've got top end guys like Martinez and Theodore and Pietrangelo. They punched Sam Bennett in the nose right off the get-go. They basically called Tkachuk on the stuff that he pulled. Their big defense was physical. Florida hasn't come up against somebody who proposes the sort of problems that Vegas does, and that's the only thing that I think may hinder them from winning.
Yeah, I mean, I see your point. I don't know that I think it's as big a concern as you do, but they played well. They ended up winning the game. I thought, as you pointed out, it was really a pretty even game until we got to the very end, and then Vegas, and maybe that's the advantage. Maybe they're that little bit on their defense, having a big defense, maybe that gives them the one goal.
They went up against McAvoy. They went up against Boston. I mean, it's like that Boston defense is not.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah, but Lindholm was hurt.
Yeah.
Toronto's defense is not deep. Carolina's is probably the best defense, and they swept them, but maybe that had to do more with Bob. I'm just saying 1 through 6, Vegas's defense poses. You will not be able to play. And Russ was telling me, and I've been saying this is a narrative that I've been talking about and I had to eat crow because the guy played really well the first 3 rounds. He's like, Gustav Forsling was the worst defenseman on the ice for Florida. And he's playing on the top pairing with Brandon Montour. And Gustav Forsling, in my mind, was what Matt Carl was to Chris Pronger. He was a creation of the guy who he played with. But you couldn't take anything away from him. He played well in those 3 rounds. But Russ was telling me he was terrible in game 1.
Yeah, but
I didn't see it as terrible, but I saw the mistakes. He didn't have his good game. I thought Montour didn't have a very good game, honestly, until like the last little bit of the game. Like he didn't activate himself like he had been activating himself the rest of the before.
And Paul Maurice is playing him 26 minutes. It's
I know he did, but I thought there was a little bit of like nerves on. I mean, there are some players who haven't been there before. There were some nerves. You can see it, and you could see. And Montour with about 10 minutes left, you can tell a good Montour game by how many times he's behind the other team's goalie. And Montour will go behind the net, the offensive net, every period once, like in general, But he didn't do that until the third period of this game, and I thought that was kind of telling.
Well, go ahead.
Just one thing. I mean, one of the problems we have in sports, and it's also the fun of sports is there's too much. The sky is falling after every game, and paralysis by analysis. We just overanalyze every game, and the truth of it is, 2 really good teams play together, and Maurice is right. Like, let's not get too carried away. It was one game. It was tight till the to the end. At the end, Vegas proved to be the better, team. But, let's see what happens now. Once you start playing games 2 and 3, you have a better handle on how the series. But let's not get too carried away with game 1. Like, I don't think it means that, Tkachuk is not going to be a factor. I don't think it means that, Aiden Hill can't keep up with Bobrovsky. We got to just kind of wait and just kind of play this out a little bit. But, one thing I'm curious about, and I haven't really seen anything on it, maybe it's out there and I've just missed it, but I wondered if this is playing out in terms of the interest level like I thought it would. Like, I think all good hockey people will like this series because they know the two teams are evenly matched and there's a lot going on here. And I wondered, will the just the slight fans of hockey, whether they're even watching this series because it doesn't have big.
I think my feeling is it's getting more attention than I thought it would. And that's good. I had a feeling like this was going to be, my feeling is that there's two teams that are kind of, Vegas still has a little bit of an interesting thing to them, even though they're, they've been here for 6 years. I think they still have a kind of a thing like they are. And then Florida is that big underdog thing that people love to follow. So I think that is going into it.
I think it's getting more attention because the NBA final is so blah. It's so like even though Miami won yesterday, I checked in for like 15 minutes of it. But everybody's putting it side by side to NBA finals. Maybe not the same fan bases, but if it was Boston, Los Angeles, the Stanley Cup final would get drowned out. But I think that the matchup is intriguing between Florida and Vegas.
Yeah.
And the NBA final is sort of so blah.
I mean, it might get drowned out by what's being covered on it. But I don't know. I'm not one of those people that think like people are going to decide whether they're going to watch either of those finals. I think that people know, the hockey fans are going to watch the hockey final, and basketball fans and the rest of the world are going to watch the basketball final, and that's just how it's going to go.
Yeah, okay, like in politics, the elections are not won by the Republicans getting their vote out or the Democrats getting their vote out. It's who gets the independence. And
hockey's never gotten the independence, Mike.
and in sport, it's getting those non-traditional fans to watch. And then I told Russ last night, I said, the NHL has to hope for a quick series in the NBA final and games 5, 6 in this series going 5, 6 or going 6 or 7, because then you'll get more eyeballs. Now,
we will. One more thing about this too. I do think that Bobrovsky was not the one thing about Bobrovsky. Like, can we say right now that he is like the best rebound control goalie we've seen forever? I mean, Bobrovsky, he is a vacuum cleaner. Like, just his ability to swallow up pucks. I've said all along, you guys know, I've been pounding the drum that he's really good at freezing the puck and stopping momentum that way. But he's also just incredible at taking shots from the point and not giving up rebounds. Like, point shots, are you usually put it on net to get either a deflection or a rebound, and he takes the rebound aspect out of it. And I think that's starting to make teams try to be a little bit different with the way they approach their shots. Mm-hmm. And the second a goalie has a team changing the way they approach their shots, the goalie's won. that I've always felt that. Like, that's when the goalie has got it, because that's that the teams can't worry about the goalie. They just got to do their thing.
Now we had some coaching news over the weekend, and I wanted to get to this because obviously one of them is somebody that Kevin and I both are well acquainted with. Just briefly, Greg Cronin was announced as the head coach of the Anaheim Ducks. He was a former Leaf assistant, former Islanders assistant, was coaching the AHL team for the Avalanche for the last 4 or 5 years. So good teaching coach. That makes a lot of sense for a young team. I get that. Kev, I'm really surprised that Babcock is going to coach in Columbus. I'm a little surprised that Jarmo, and now, Jarmo selected Tortorella, and we know Tortorella's proclivities. So maybe we shouldn't be surprised that he took a chance on Babcock. We know Babcock is a great coach, but that's not the problem with Babcock right now. It's the sort of specter hanging over him.
Yeah, no, I was a little surprised too, but but I think you're right. I mean, I think most people would agree, even some of the players who didn't like him as a human being will say, he's very prepared as a coach. And my read on this, and maybe I'm wrong, but My read on this is that John Davidson's personality and Jarmo Kekalainen's personality are such that I think they're not going to let Babcock get away with any of his shenanigans, for lack of a better term. Like I just think they'll just say no, and he's going to try to exert his will, and they're going to say no. Both John Davidson is a strong executive. Anybody that knows John, he's a heck of a nice guy, but he knows what he's doing. He's been at this a while. I just think it's just going to be a tighter thing. He's going to say, Mike, you coach, you prepare that team, but I don't want to see anything other than that. I don't want any pushback on the decisions that Jarmo and I make, and let's go. And I'll bet Mike Babcock probably would agree to all that. Now that he's waited a while to get back into the mix. So this could work out for him. Like a Babcock that works a little harder on his relationship with his players could be a really interesting coach.
So what you're saying is that there's going to be no lists of who is the laziest teammate.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
Kent Johnson. But apparently,
announce Russ from Vegas joining us. Thank you so much for getting.
I was just about to. I was going to intro him.
That's okay. I can do it.
But
also,
Russ,
good show. You show up, Russ. I appreciate it.
Yeah, sorry, time difference got the best of me.
I want to ask you one question, Russ, because we are talking about Babcock, but I do want to go back to my thing, and I think you and I are on opposite ends of this, so this is why I really wanted to check this out. I told him I changed my pick after this to Florida's winning the series after game 1.
Why would you do that?
Because I am ultimately unimpressed with Aiden Hill, and I in that game I felt like he overplayed everything.
He overplayed a lot. There's no question. I did talk about that on Syria.
The great save he made was an unbelievable save, but he was out of position to make the save, way out of position to make the save. And I felt like Florida started to figure that out and started waiting on him a little bit and holding up their shots just a little bit longer to see where he would go. And then that's when they started hitting the posts. And I felt like they were honing in on Aiden Hill as the game went on. And I'm like, if he's going to play like that, he's going to be the worst goalie they've faced so far. And that's why I changed my pick.
Well, I understand what you're saying, because I did bring up a similar thing saying, hey, there's opportunity here for Florida if they actually can stretch him in front of the net, because he did leave the net open like 3 times. But the thing is, Vegas has great defense, and they were there to make the stops. And so maybe if they does the same thing next game, Florida only takes advantage of one of those. The 2 biggest things I thought Florida were exposed on was Gustav Forsling had 4 turnovers, 4 giveaways, and he's playing 25 minutes. And that's sort of starting to show the crack a little bit on their defense. And then just the defensive forwards that Vegas has to go along with a good defense is too much for Florida. So Florida has to be able to get a lead, and they have to get a sizable lead. So I think, like at the beginning of this game, they need to really press it early, hope they can get one early. And then if Vegas has a lapse like they did last game, they got to put like 2 up, because I think that's the only way they're going to beat Vegas. Because even though Hill may give up a goal or so, he still has a better save percentage than Bob in the playoffs, like he does.
Yeah, I know. I've watched him play, and I wasn't like the reason I picked him. I thought he was playing well, but he's got it. Now that could just be a game 1 nerves thing, maybe it is.
Could be.
But if he hones himself again, but. You know who he reminds me of when I'm watching him play is like Robin Leonard. And
I can see that.
And my issues with Robin Leonard have always been the same thing. Like Luongo had a little bit of it, and Marc-Andre Fleury has a little bit of that overplaying and going too far one way. Like on the first goal, he cuts off the short side and like half the back of the boards to give Stahl a chance to like go around and stuff it, no problem. And there were several
that was also the defenseman basically letting Stahl go around the net.
Yeah, that's part of it.
Stahl made a great play too, but I mean, the other reality is this: like when you look in the replay of the pucks that hit the post on him, there was a good foot that they could have. It wasn't like they just skimmed it past his arm and hit the post. There was a foot there. You know what I mean? It's like that's the difference between some of the posts you've seen. Like you got sometimes see it just did it hit his shoulder a little bit before it hit the post? Like the goalie basically had it covered, but he did not have those posts covered on those shots at all. And no, I don't know. That's why I kind of think Florida could be opportunistic and take something like that.
But sometimes it's better to be lucky than to be good. So, I mean,
yeah, but it's a 7-game series, and that's what what I like about 7-game series. Like,
and I didn't pick Florida to get swept, so I think that they're gonna respond in this game, but in this series. But Russ, I wanted to go back to Babcock because I just, first of all, I find it ironic that he had to squeeze the last bit of juice out of the lemon when it came to, I'm not going to sign my contract until July 1st so I can get every bottom dollar out of the Maple Leafs, which I thought was just hilarious. But I don't know. I mean, the talk is he wanted to go to a smaller market because he was sort of like exposed in Toronto. So maybe Columbus or, other opportunities out there. Maybe that's a better fit for him. I just don't know whether his style of coaching plays anymore.
Well, all right. So I don't think Mike Babcock would ever choose to be in a small market. I think that's what he was stuck with. And it's no offense to Columbus. I just think that's what was available, and he took it. Yeah. And look, Mike Babcock knows how to coach.
Yes.
That was never the issue here. The issue here was treatment of players and such. If he comes off and he is different that way, but still does the same coaching, defense still wins in this league, and he's very good at that. Yeah. I mean, again, I can go back to the time that he complained that he had all lefties on the penalty kill, all actually on power play, all lefties.
He had 6 lefties on the defense.
Yeah, and he worked with that. Like, it was like most coaches would not want that situation. So I think he could do good things for them in the standings because their team's really not bad. The team's a pretty good team. They just got destroyed early in the season and just could never get on track. Yeah. If they stay healthy, I think Babcock could at least make them a little more than respectable and keep them in the race.
To me, Columbus is all about keeping their window open, right? And their window has been opening. It's been open, and they've been very methodically, slowly opening their window, right? Like they get better and better and better, and they might fall a little bit, but then they get better again. And they've been very good about this. And then Gaudreau, and now Gaudreau's a turning point where you're like, okay, you're pushing your window open now with Gaudreau, and your record went down. So that's like that's why this is a move where you have to that fan base, you have to say, okay, now Kevin, you saw Babcock in his best, like at his best, like in his best.
Normally when you get a kind of a tough coach, what you say is, oh boy, a guy like Johnny Gaudreau is going to have a lot of problems. I don't think Gaudreau will have any problems with Babcock because Babcock generally lets his offensive people play offense. Generally the top 6 forwards, he kind of leaves them alone. Says, you play your game. As long as you produce, you won't hear from me.
Right. I remember you saying that.
He doesn't, it's not like Tortorella that says, you got to block shots, you got to do this. He just wants those top 6 to perform. And I remember, a story of, Zetterberg telling us that when he put Zetterberg and Datsuk together, they went in to talk to Babcock and said, well, who do you want taking the faceoffs? You got 2 centers on here. And he goes, I don't care who takes the faceoff. You guys decide. Like, don't bother me with that. You guys just score and do your thing. Decide amongst yourselves who takes the faceoffs and do your thing. But Babcock owns the 3rd and 4th lines. Like he wants them to play exactly how he wants them to play, and they don't get any room. They got to play his style. And as you said, he's a defensive guy. He's going to demand strong defensive play, and that's it. The problem, the toughness with Mike always comes with, he knows what he wants, and he can be hard on general managers.
Oh yes.
So doing that, and I think if like Ken Holland was a strong general manager, but Ken Holland's also a nice guy. So that came into conflict because oftentimes you got to fight fire with fire,
right?
With Babcock. So I think with Columbus, I think Carolina will listen real politely and just say no.
Yeah, Yarmo's tougher than you think. Yarmo's
Yarmo's very tough.
I mean, okay.
Yeah, he's not a pushover at all.
Heck, Brendan Shanahan had to bring in Lou as a buffer because he knew that Babcock would run roughshod over Mark Hunter and Kyle Dubas. And he tried to do the same thing with Lou. Lou picked up Frankie Corrado off of waivers with Vancouver.
And he did
Mike Babcock said, "I'm not playing this guy. I didn't say you should pick him up," and he said the guy.
Right, that happened with Holland too, didn't it, Kevin? In
Yeah.
Detroit?
Yeah.
You were telling me that before. Wasn't like Billy Leno one of those situations? Like,
well, yeah, and I think Commodore was a.
Oh yeah.
You know, so he asked Holland to bring in. He wanted a shot blocker, and
right.
They brought him in, and then when he got him here, he didn't like him and just didn't play him. And so
he does have a little bit of an ego,
yeah,
a little bit.
That's like saying I have a little bit of a weight.
And when you're coming from a team like Detroit, and then you're signed away to Toronto, that's a big difference than when you have been coaching like a group of teenagers or something like that, like you've been doing, and now you're coaching Columbus. I think that's going to play into a little bit of his like.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess like what everybody has said is so true. I mean, he really is a good coach. I mean, most of the people, like I said, who don't like him admit he's a good coach. Like in terms of X's and O's and preparing teams and all that, you hope he's have learned from this,
right?
Like and like you said, it's kind of a different world now in terms of how you approach players. Like, so hopefully he has learned what is effective and what is not. I mean, the master of that was Scotty Bowman, who didn't coach anywhere near the style he coached when he in the 1970s.
Right.
Like when he would threaten players with, by the time at the end, he was coaching completely different. He just didn't speak to players.
Well, it's going to be important who he gets as his assistant coaches, don't you think? I mean, I think that's going to be very important for him.
Well, and I think Babcock knew that because he always picked guys that got along pretty well with the players.
Yeah, right, and that's important. That's important.
I mean, look, there's good talent there too with young talent that he can mold. If Juracek could be a star in this league, so can Kent Johnson. And I think like a guy like Johnson, the way he plays off the wall, I think Babcock will help him. And I would think he could help Juracek too. And Juracek is a heck of a talent. So I mean, there's some building blocks there. Line, who knows? I know everybody's wondering how that'll work out. Who knows? I can't tell you if that's going to work out or not. But they do have third or fourth liners that definitely would work out too. So
this is what I would say about Line. If he produces, I'm telling you, Mike will leave him alone.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, he didn't leave a guy like William Nylander alone simply because William Nylander was such a defensive liability at times that it made his offensive production counterproductive. You know what I'm saying? And for every point that he got, he gave up a point with his defensive problems. So he'll have a problem with that. But if they're, competent defensively, then I think you're right. He'll just leave them alone.
They got to be at least okay. You know what I mean?
Right. I think it does. But it does raise, like in a similar way, the Gaudreau signing there, having Babcock there, it does raise Columbus's, vision about like around the rest of the league, like how people see them. I think that it's suddenly now we're seeing like, okay, they've got a Mike Babcock, they signed Gaudreau, because there was a.
I think that's going to take a little while. I don't think it'll be instantaneous. It all depends on if the talent there works with him, but I don't think just bringing him in changes anything on how a team's going to play against them just yet.
I think I'm just more saying perception as far as like.
Okay, I mean maybe with the fan base,
the fan perception in general, it's like we are a legitimate team. We have
I can think with the fan base, sure.
I don't think it's going to make Columbus a destination city that they have Mike Babcock as the head coach. In fact, I think it'll be. I mean, they with most of the players that they got when Torts was there, they either drafted them or traded for them. They didn't. It was. I don't think they didn't get many free agents because they knew.
But now with the salary cap the way it is, they might because the reality is they've got space that other teams don't have, and
I mean they got a pretty big one in Gaudreau. So
they did.
Well, can I touch on that for a second because Russ was in Vegas. I don't know if he was there for Gary Bettman's state of the NHL presser, but Kev, the interesting thing was. He talked about, the league making either him or Bill Daly talked about the league making $6 billion and that, that the cap is going to go up.
They said maybe 6. They didn't say they wouldn't stop on 6.
Right. But that was the thing. Everything that they talked about, it was like trying to hold on to something that's been coated in Vaseline. It was like The Arizona situation. He's like, well, we're looking at other things, but we're looking at possibility. They could not nail him down on that, and that is, Russ, how many people asked questions about Arizona? Was it one, and then they just moved on?
3. No, there were 2 Arizona questions because there was a question, and then there was the follow-up. Because the follow-up was, can you tell us why you keep doing this with Arizona? What is the attraction? And he talked about the great fan base, and and part of that's true, and part of it isn't. The part that I think got a lot of groans was just the initial Arizona talk, and that was just like, well, they have other options. They're going to look at them in the Phoenix area, whatever. And it's like, we all know that they only have like 3 months to do this. They didn't have these options lined up when they went and did the Tempe deal because they thought that was a done deal.
Right.
So they have a little bit of window here, but not much.
Did you guys see the Ron McClain interview with Gary Bettman?
No. Okay,
so that was on that. This is like historically, Ron McClain at the beginning of the Stanley Cup playoffs does a big interview for the CBC,
and sometimes it's confrontational.
It is, and it's just one-on-one. And he got way more into Arizona in that interview. He said things like the clock is definitely ticking. He said that, and I've never heard Gary say that about Arizona. Honestly, like the clock is definitely ticking. And he also said, there are other places we can go. We don't want to go.
Well, obviously Salt Lake that was brought up in the press conference
a lot. And also going back to Atlanta is starting to become a thing too. But he said flat out, why have you done this? He said, well, because when you won a national contract, you need that market. You need to say you have a team in that market. And he flat out said that that's the answer that he should have said, not the fan base necessarily, Russ, but he was really straight on with Ron McClain. He said, listen, we need that. That's a big market. And, so if they move to Atlanta, they're kind of doing like a comparable market.
Right.
So we can see Atlanta is like, that's the, but he was,
he
would say the clock's ticking, Kev.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. I don't remember hearing Gary ever saying that, but I think it's also what Russ said as well. I mean, there's 3 months because, the reason they can't move this season is, everybody's committed and buildings and all that. Well, the clock is ticking because they got to tell if they don't have an arena in 3 months at the start of this season, they got to start planning for what to do next season, and they got to tell buildings clear your spaces because don't take any more concerts because you're coming there. So they got to plan for the not 23-24, but they got to plan for 24-25 now. That's why if they can't cut a deal with playing in downtown Phoenix or whatever their plan is, I have no idea, but then they're going to have to commit to going somewhere, and the league is going to have to decide where that's going to be. So
another issue that got groans was the Ottawa issue, only because Gary wouldn't say that anybody was out of the running, but clearly the group with Ryan Reynolds is out of the running.
Yeah,
and he wouldn't admit to that.
They said that they were out of the running 2 months ago.
I know, but he won't admit to that.
Well, don't you think he wants to talk Ryan Reynolds to get back into it?
Yeah, it's possible.
Well, then just say that. I mean, just say Ryan Reynolds is still interested.
Yeah. And the one thing he never, ever, ever, ever talks about is this kind of stuff. So, like, for he's never going to admit to anything regarding teams being bought. I mean, the only reason that Salt Lake City is such a viable option is because of the one guy who's there, who owns all the teams and is like wants to bring it there, and the NHL love one guy things. Like that's the situation they love.
He's a tech billionaire. He was on Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick's podcast. He owns this. He owns the building. He owns the Utah Jazz. He owns the MLS team, and he wants to own an NHL team. Sold.
Yeah, I mean that's a perfect situation for the NHL, but that feels more like a perfect situation for an expansion situation to me.
I mean, then you got to you do have to at least talk to the folks who currently own the team. That's part of the issue. But I'm less I think that Arizona stuff is far more important than the timing of how long it takes to sell Ottawa. Like, what's the difference? It's still
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's no big deal. Like, if it takes 6 months, it takes 6 months. Like, sort it out. I mean, this is the same media group that has never forgiven the NHL for not, bringing in what was the guy's name on Long Island?
Boots Del Biagio.
No. No, the guy in Los
Spanos?
Yes,
When he didn't have the money,
Right.
Spanos?
Yeah. And so
yeah.
it takes a while to vet these groups, and
Yeah.
so be it.
So there's one other thing, though. One
I
other
have
thing is
in the brain.
so that diamond group with the RSN stuff. Gary was asked about the financial part of it and the viewing part of it, and he really only answered the viewing part of it. He basically said, "Hey, people in market will still get their games." And then, of course, he sold the out of market. It's in 1,100 things. It's like, yes, we know. You don't have to sell that any further. But so clearly the NHL is going to cover it if all of a sudden it dissolves. But the thing is, what he wouldn't cop to and what was being asked and what we're seeing written is the NHL is clearly fourth on that list for getting pennies on a dollar whenever they settle. And that is going to be a problem that will affect, I think, the cap next year. Yeah. I do. And this year's cap, they said, hey, it's $1 million, give or take, but it's going to affect the next cap after that. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. I also heard that some of the teams that some of the groups that are involved in the Ottawa thing that aren't going to get it are starting to be pitched about other situations. I don't know exactly what that means. Like, I don't know if that means, and that is a very NHL thing to do, though. I know the NHL does that.
Well, it could be expansion because, again, Daly has said twice now that, hey, we're not looking to expand, but we're always talking to people, and you just never know. He made it like that, and my feeling
opportunities. Yeah.
My feeling was this. My feeling was when the gambling money truly runs its course, and they can get all they can get from that, then they're going to go to expansion again because then the owners are going to be looking for more money like they always do, and I feel like. I think the expansion is going to come quicker than we think, and I think that's probably what it is, Ek.
And as we know, Russ, the players don't get a chunk of the expansion money. That's all owners,
right?
No, but they still benefit because
they get players.
Yeah.
There's more jobs,
right? There's far more jobs, so they're in favor of it. Right. That doesn't mean they shouldn't get some expansion money. I'm just saying,
sure,
it's not like they get nothing, but. The thing that's often forgotten about the NHL in terms of the expansion, like you hear all the time, wow, there's not enough players, they're going to go too far. This is still a gate revenue driven league. There's not enough national television money.
Yeah.
It's not like the NFL where you can play to empty stadiums and still make money. So,
no.
That just is more gate revenue when you bring in 2 more teams. So, and
well, the thing is, Daly, when he was asked, about the expansion thing, the first thing he talked about was the players, and he didn't feel like the talent pool would be diluted. And I'm like, okay, you might be right about that. And that's also what led me to believe expansion is coming quicker. It is. Yeah. I think within a couple of years they're going to start talking about it again.
Well, look at the grand success they've had in the expansion in the last 2 expansions. I mean, they both have been overwhelming, and we saw expansions. We saw expansions when we were younger. Other expansions like Tampa and other, Nashville when they came in, and that's nothing like we've seen in Vegas or Seattle. I mean, those expansions were slow builds and getting there.
Yeah.
I mean, these are 2 teams that went, like Seattle went to the conference finals, and Vegas is in their second Stanley Cup final. It's like
but those expansions
are pretty entertaining, especially for someone buying in. They're like, I'm going to get a pretty good team. Like, what other league can you buy into where you get a playoff team?
Those expansion drafts back in the 90s, they were not structured the way the ones for Vegas or Seattle were. So it enabled them.
I think that's what he just said, Mike.
That's what I'm trying to say. Like the owners get if you're an owner trying to buy an expansion team, you're like, hey, you know what, Mike?
You get a better deal now.
I was studying it. I was thinking 1 year. It was a clearer way of saying.
Yeah, I think not that any other leagues are looking to expand. But, clearly the NHL has the right model now. I mean, why, it was crazy in the old concept where you'd bring people in as a franchisee and then not give them the tools in which to be successful. Right. Like it was just a stupid concept. Yeah. And now they've got it right. You bring them in, you help them, prop them up. Vegas became the number 1 revenue producer in terms of all the nonsense that goes into creating revenue almost immediately, and Seattle, I got to believe, is up there as well.
But it does upset fans, though. Fans are upset with the newer teams being this successful when their teams aren't that successful, and that is a thing, Kev. Like you're right, they are being given a good track to be successful early on, where those teams in the old days weren't. Plus, the talent was definitely diluted in the old days. But like, I get it. Like, fans of certain cities are like, well, look at this. They got a leg up.
Well, that's because your team was mismanaged. That's all. So
and in the case of Buffalo, a franchise that is steeped in history with a lot of hockey fans, very close to Canada, I cannot tell you how many friends of mine who are Sabres fans who are pissed off that a team that's been around 6 years has been in a Stanley Cup final twice, and that the Sabres, who've been around for 53 years, have not been in the playoffs for a dozen years. It pisses them off.
Let me put it to you in terms that hopefully the fan base will understand. So are you saying that if we went to the Red Wings that have missed the playoffs for 7 years, the Buffalo Sabres for 12 years, the Anaheim Ducks, the Arizona Coyotes, and they said, hey, look, you guys are right. It's just unfair that these teams on. So we'll take all of your players and we'll divide them among the other things. We'll have a draft and all that. You'll participate in that, and you could start over.
Just dispersal draft.
Dispersal draft, and you could start over, and we'll give you the same shake that Vegas and Seattle got. Do you think they would take that? No, they would not. No, they wouldn't. So it's nice for them to complain, but it's not like they handed them the best player in the league. They just gave them a bunch of mediocre players, and they put them in the draft, high up, so that helped them in a bit, but so
honestly hasn't helped them yet, Kev. I mean, the draft thing is just barely.
Well, Beniers helped.
Yeah,
Beniers helped Seattle immeasurably this year.
Okay, yeah, he did. Yeah, that's one.
Yeah, so but. I don't think they would. I don't think they would think it. I think that they would say their situation is better, just bottoming out and, going on. So I don't know. That's why I think that argument is just kind of.
This has more to do with Mike's friends. Let's go there for a second. Because Mike's friends are sharing Mike's opinion that everybody else succeeding is their fault, and that we should not
have friends. So
I mean. I understand that. I mean, there's some frustration with not making the playoffs. I'm just saying, it's just what you say. So.
That's what I'm saying. Don't blame the Vegas Knights or Seattle for the fact that you haven't made the playoffs. I mean, that's like, to me, that's not right. I mean, am I wrong about that? I don't know.
Just to answer Randy, Stephen Cohen, the Mets owner, he's more interested in soccer than hockey.
Russ, there was a report came out from Molly Walker of the New York Post regarding Patrick Waugh that he is not a candidate for the Rangers job. So it sounds like it's down to Laviolette and John Hines.
Yeah, I'm curious about the timing of this because I was on SiriusXM like at 12:15, and I thought Patrick Waugh would get an interview, and I said it. And I kind of wonder if the Rangers are reacting to that because they hadn't said one way or the other during this whole Memorial Cup whether they would talk to him or not. And now they finally decided. And I wonder if it was because it was on national radio and someone heard it and they're like, you know what? We need to get this out there now so they could squelch it. And
I wrote about it.
I don't know if that's the truth.
But I'll take credit. I'll take credit too, Russ, because I wrote about it at the same time that you were talking about it on Next Time, I think. Because I heard the same thing. I heard that there was something there. I heard that they were going to talk.
And they wanted to shut it down. That's
right.
So I mean,
it's going to be Laviolette. I don't think John Hines has a chance, honestly.
Okay. I mean,
Islanders coach or a Devils coach, Russ.
He's a Metro coach.
I probably would take Hines, but I understand why they'll take Laviolette.
Yeah, they want the guy who has the cup ring, even though Hines is the more prepared guy each game. Like I get that. I know he's really good, but I also know how New York how they think about it, and they want to they want to show we've got the winner, even though it's been quite a few years.
And you're right on it. He just has a higher pedigree at this point, and there's the Devils thing, and the team, the last team the Hines had just didn't do very well, and all the above. So
the other big news of the day that I think can't be understated is the Cole Caulfield contract. I have to say, Kev, I mean, you see the Sabres have done it. You see now that and Ottawa did it with Norris and Kachuk. and Shabbat, and they've locked up all their young guys. Now Montreal, even though they have some really terrible contracts on their books, they got Suzuki locked up 8 years at 7.8, and now Caulfield locked up at 8 years at 7.8. General managers are learning. You get these young guys locked up long term for a little less, and it helps you down the line.
Yeah. No, and not everybody. What was the final number on the AAV?
7.85. Just
yeah. So get some under 8, and Cole Caulfield is the player they hope that he will be. Then that'll be a deal for them.
I think it's
and if he's not, then they'll lose. But I think this is the kind of contract you give when you you think the guy's going to be good, and I think he's going to be a goal scorer. So this will probably work out for him.
Yeah,
I like the signing.
People in Philadelphia hate this one, right, Ross?
Yeah, I like the signing. I think it's the right number. I think, if he didn't get hurt last year, he was scoring 50 goals. I think we all know that. So it's smart. Now, the team that's going to have a problem is the Devils, because they can't give Jesper Bratt this contract. He hasn't earned it. And so that's where they're going to have a tougher negotiation now, because you can't give him that kind of term. He didn't have a great playoff. So now maybe you're going to go like 4 or 5 years at 6.5, but you got to hope he takes that, because if he doesn't, then it gets kind of dicey. And so we'll see how that goes. That's going to be a tough one for them.
How does this affect Timo Meier too? Because he's going to want the big payday as well.
I don't know what's happening with Timo Meier. I mean, I can't even predict what might happen. I mean, maybe they're going to pay the $10 million and decide what to do after that.
Yeah,
they are. I think they're going to do that, and I think they're signing Timo Meier. I think there's no question about it. I think they know. I think they've already figured it out.
Trade Bratt then. They probably trade Bratt then. But this is the thing here. This is the book that these teams are following. Tage Thompson had one big year after 3 or 4 years,
I'm sorry.
And Buffalo signed him for 7 years. Dylan Cousins was just having his first breakout year, and they signed him on a 7-year deal. Now you see Suzuki and you see Caulfield. The book has been set. That's what and you look at teams like Toronto, what they did with their 4 players. They didn't get any discount. These players essentially traded term for a little less AAV, Kev, and teams like Toronto didn't get that benefit.
Yeah, I mean, why do you think they can't give Bratt big money?
Because he's not worth it.
Well,
he didn't. He hasn't proven it. He hasn't proven it.
But Caulfield hasn't either.
I think he's proven more than Bratt. I will say that.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, Mike. This is where I think you might have it wrong with the Toronto part of this. These teams are doing it like that early with these guys because as very young players, they are willing to. They want that money as soon as possible, and they are willing to make that trade-off. But I don't think Toronto did that as early with every single one of their guys.
It was all it was coming out of their ELC on all 3 of them, Russ. It was coming out. It was Nylander, Marner, and Matthews. There was no bridge deal. It came right out of their ELC.
Okay, I thought maybe one of them had a bridge deal. Okay,
and they got the short end of the stick on both things. They didn't get the 8-year deal, and they got the max. Matthews was making. Don't get me wrong.
Matthews, you should never talk about like that.
Right,
one forget.
Right, but he made 11.6 right off the end. But Nylander 6 years, Marner 6 years. And
I guess it's just the Toronto market. I mean, New York is similar. New York almost never gets guys on deals either. I mean, they always seem to get their money. So, I mean, that's definitely the way you want to do it. But the thing is, like, Marty St. Louis had to sign off on this, I'm sure. They went and asked him, do you see this in Caulfield? Do you see? And, we talked about this on Sirius. Like, he's a 5'7" guy, but he has an elite shot. I'm not saying he's an elite player, but he has an elite shot. And if you're that height in this league, there's something that you have to do that's elite. But it was funny because, Mick is like, well, 5'7", how many of those guys do you have? Whatever. And I brought up Stan Jonathan. He goes, but he wasn't a goal scorer. I'm like, I know. He was the only guy I could think of that played that height when I was growing up. But I do think we see a few more of these guys now, simply because, like, I think the Savoys and guys like that, and we'll see a few more of them because you could still have the bigger guys around them. but you do need some of this elite talent. And you know what? If they happen to be smaller, they happen to be smaller.
All right, just to finish up the show here, Russ. So you're in Vegas for a couple days, and I know that we talked about, your search for certain delicacies. One being the ridiculous price for the Orange Julius.
Oh my God, Kevin
you
like this.
You opted for something else.
Yeah. Well, actually, didn't even get this something else but the thing is, I had seen they have a big sign in the lobby for Orange Julius, and I probably haven't had one in a decade. Now, I do have a DQ by me, but it's just a straight DQ. They don't have any Orange Julius there. So I figured, all right, let me go get an Orange Julius because I used to really like them. The problem is they are now marketing the Orange Julius like it's a Jamba Juice or whatever, and it was $11.99 or $12.99, and I just looked at that, and I said, I can't do it. I just couldn't do it in good conscience.
I'd rather friggin' starve.
I mean, just a regular Dairy Queen single cone was like $8.50, and I was like, I can't do it. I just won't. I wouldn't do it. It bugged me. But I'll tell you the real. Everybody talks about Vegas. The one sad thing in Vegas is the amount of people that are eating lousy pizza, and it is facsimile. Just if they call it New York pizza, it's only because it's thin. It has nothing to do with New York. The crust doesn't even look close. I mean, it's just the smell is not the same. And I'm not saying this isn't like enjoyable for people, but it's just like the amount of places that are masquerading like their New York pizza is just crazy.
Kev, if I wanted to lose weight, I think I'd go to Vegas because it's too expensive and the food is, and it's hot and the food is bad. So.
Yeah, and in the old days, they used to attract people to Vegas with cheap meals.
Yes.
Prime rib, $3.99, that kind of nonsense.
Well, that's the thing. So, like the buffet here at the Excalibur, a breakfast buffet is like $28, and the dinner buffet is like $31.99. And it's like, so Kev, those days of that cheap buffet thing, they are gone.
Long gone. You're staying at Excalibur?
Yeah.
Wow. Is that the media?
No, but it's across the street. And so, like, I went for the lazy factor. I only have to walk across a bridge to get to the T-Mobile Center, and that's good so I can keep going back and forth. And I got a deal. Of course, I got a deal. So.
Yeah. I always stayed when I was there. There's a Courtyard Marriott that's over by where it is now the football. And it's a real easy Uber ride. So I've always stayed up there. And the prices were always, $100 less than,
Oh, no, this one was, even this for the Excalibur was cheaper than, oh my God, compared to the League Hotel, forget it.
Yeah, the League Hotel was always outrageous. So,
all right, great show, guys. We'll be back probably tomorrow, but definitely on Wednesday with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast for the departed Eklund, for Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen. I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.